You need to have this mind among yourselves. It's yours in Christ Jesus. Even though he was in the form of God, he didn't count equality with God anything to be grasped. But he emptied himself. He took the form of a servant. And being born in the likeness of human beings, being found in that human form, he humbled himself and became obedient even to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God has highly exalted him, bestowed on him the name which is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. And all of this is to the glory of God the Father. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. He's writing to the people of Philippi some 2,000 years ago, and he's suggesting to them that they learn how to put on the mind of Christ. Has anyone mastered that here? I know we're trying to do that. Some days,
On the road.
On the road. Yeah, some days are better than others. The mind of Christ is probably the primary theme for the season of Lent. And we're in the last few days of Lent. And Lent in preparation for not only Good Friday, but also for the resurrection on Easter Sunday. One of the things that we struggle with during the season of Lent is how to be a better disciple, and then how to be more effective in that discipleship. What's that look like? How would the world know if you or I were a disciple of Jesus Christ? Could they get it by the language we use when we speak? Would they recognize that we're a disciple of Jesus by how we conduct ourselves in meetings and in the company of others, and in the presence of those who really just don't agree with us or just can't stand the ground we walk on? What defines us as Christians other than our ability to put on the mind of Christ? That's probably the most widely observed season in the Christian year, because remember, Easter Day was originally the one day, the only day in the Christian year. That's how it all began. Our celebrations initially were very few. It was Easter, and we celebrated that every week on the Sabbath. They met weekly on the first day of the week. And what did they do when they came together? They prayed. They were interested in concerns that you may have for your week's events, and for those in your family who would be in need of healing or some form of prayer. They prayed. Then they broke bread together. There is nothing that binds us together any closer as a family than those moments when we sit down and share, just even if it's for a brief period of time, breaking of bread. I remember as a child how difficult it was for my parents to get me to sit down and break bread. We kids ran in packs, and we were outdoors most of the time. We got called in to dinner. It was all they could do to get me in that house. And then I looked at what was on the table, and I was trying to figure out how fast I could consume this and get back out with my buddies. So my parents put in a sort of a series of regulations. And that is that I had to eat slowly, and I had to eat all of my food, and I had to sit there and wait until they finished theirs, and then I had to ask to be excused. And I found that by the time I did that and raced out that door again, my friends were then in their communal settings at home, and I would often have a little weight on my hands. But that's, in a sense, family. And part of putting on the mind of Christ is learning how to see one another in this old world of ours as part of God's family. We divide ourselves up into tribes pretty easily. We separate according to nation, to state. You name it. There are various ways in which we divide ourselves into smaller groups, distinguished from others. But with the mind of Christ, to see everyone in this old world as a brother or a sister. It sounds like a really neat thought until Jesus reminds us that we have to also apply that to our enemies. That is so difficult to do. So after breaking bread and giving this image of what family can look like, the people, the early Christians, they would turn to the apostles, those who had been followers of Jesus, and they'd say, tell us some stories. It's almost like saying, tell me a bedtime story. You were with Jesus. You heard what he said. You saw what he did. Tell me one of those stories. And it would feed them. Just as that bread fed their bodies in the breaking of the bread every Sabbath, the stories of Jesus fed their souls, kept them going from one Sabbath to the next. And their expectation that would come out every week for a while was that, but you don't have to do this too much longer, because Jesus promised that he would return, and he would return soon. And then this atmosphere of Jesus' promise, they didn't make any long-range plans. They didn't set any goals. They didn't have stewardship campaigns or a capital campaign building for the future. They thought the future was going to be God-provided, and it would just fall from the sky one day, and there'd be a new Jerusalem, and everybody else would be made new, and all the dead would rise, and everything would be wonderful. Just as Jesus promised. But then time passed by, and as disciples or apostles of Jesus began to die off, it became a serious problem for people of faith. And you can see it becoming a problem in letters like 2 Peter, when he offers an argument to try to counter the scoffers who are saying, well, Jesus may be coming, but I think you got false hope there. Because we don't know when Jesus is coming, and it's obvious it wasn't on your timetable. And so 2 Peter writes something like this. Remember, one day in Jesus' life is like 1,000 years of ours. And for some, that may have eased their anxieties a little bit, but for others, it just won't. What good is that? That 1 year and one day in our life is like 1,000 years for us. And Jesus' life is like 1,000 years for us. We want to know when he's coming. And so they decided they're going to have to come up with another way of keeping the Christians mobilized, discipleship vital. And so they came up with earthly calendars, because time had become the enemy of the church. It had to be made a friend. And it was through the domestication of time that the Christian year was formed. We're wearing purple because it's the season of Lent, and it's one of the seasons of the Christian year. But the precise details of this evolution are difficult to know, because they varied from region to region. The general outline was easy. First, there were the weekly celebrations of the resurrection. Every Sunday, there was the mystery of the incarnation, the crucifixion, the resurrection, the ascension, the gift of the Holy Spirit, and the promise of Jesus' return. And then there emerged a special emphasis in the spring on the celebration of sort of Passover and the Paschal Lamb that would focus on the crucifixion on Friday, the Last Supper on Thursday. And it created kind of a triduum of Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter Sunday. And we know that in Jerusalem the custom was for a bishop to ride into town on Palm Sunday on a donkey, just before the Passion, and inaugurate the period of observance that you and I now call Holy Week. Lent emerged in the form of a preparation for Easter. A time in which you really thought seriously about what it meant to put on the mountain of Christ. It was the most important time of the year because at the conclusion of the Lenten season, persons were baptized. Hippolytus wrote in 250 AD that in order to become a Christian, It required 3 years of preparation. We have that completely backwards in the modern church. The early church would not allow you to become a full member of the Christian community until you had been catechized for 3 years, gone through a period of training. Only after that period of training would you be baptized and then brought into full membership of the church. Now, I and many of you were baptized as infants. I didn't take any vows. I didn't make any promises to be a follower of Jesus Christ. They were made for me by my parents, who took their vows seriously and wanted to raise me in a Christian context. And part of what that meant was to bring me to church on Sundays and to expose me not only to sermons but also to the biblical teachings that may be informative and formative of my life. But I didn't know anything about my baptism. I had to be confirmed. So in modern times, we baptize persons and then we try to make them Christians. In ancient times, they made them Christians and then they baptized them. There was a penitential quality of this too. And that was that you and I had to learn what it would look like to put on the mind of Christ. When you think of how Jesus chose to live in this world, what kind of things come to mind? He preached, he taught, he healed the sick. When persons came to him that others were bringing to him for judgment, and they thought that would end in some type of judgment and punishment, it often issued most often in forgiveness. When he crossed over into the borders of Samaria and encountered persons there who had been historically the enemies of Israel, it's there that he decided he would stay a night or two, and he began to teach there, and they responded to his teachings, and the disciples were not happy with it. When small children came to him, having not embraced the faith tradition of Jesus' people, he still took the small child and put the child on his lap, and he said, you want the mind of Christ. He didn't say that, but the symbolic act indicated you're going to have to, if you want to enter the kingdom of God, if you really want to get into this mind of Christ, you have to come to it as a child. A child, if you give us something as a child, the first thing out of our mouth is not, what did I do to deserve this? It's kind of like, wow, is there anything else? You got anything else in your face? Is this the only gift? I'll take this. I love it. Thank you very much. And off they go, and they just completely celebrate that miraculous and wonderful gift that was unmerited. But you and I as adults, see, we calculate things. And when someone comes up and wants to give us something, we want to know what the deal is. Before we shake on it, we want to know, what's my buy-in on this? No one gives me something for nothing. And in a sense, that's exactly what that cross means. That we were all given freedom to live this life as disciples and loving and caring human beings. Not because of who we are or what we've done, but because that's God's gift to us, this freedom to just be. And we have a lifetime to learn, having put on the mind of Christ, what that looks like when it's seen by the world. What do you make of these letters when they're written in the time following Jesus' life and ministry? When the author said, you know how they'll know we're Christians? By our love. Or if Paul, if you have not love, you're a clanging cymbal, a loud gong. You're a lot of noise, but not much resemblance of the mind of Christ. So they put together a set of guidelines in these letters. Not all found in one letter, but what was on Paul's mind more often, he wanted you to put on the mind of Christ. And he said, to do that, you have to begin to look at life from Jesus' point of view. To have his values. To have what he desires in mind. We live in a time and in a place where the values of Jesus Christ are sorely missing. They're absent in conversation, and they're not on display in the public. What the public sees about Christianity is a wide range of things that sometimes look like the mind of Christ and sometimes look hateful, filled with prejudice with a capital P, or vengeance, no mercy, little compassion. When I started in ordained ministry years ago, church attendance was pretty much expected. If you went to work on Monday and you'd not been in church on Sunday, there's a high probability that if any of the co-workers were in the same congregation with you, somebody would say, I didn't see you in church yesterday. Now, to some degree, you and I could think, hey, that's finger wagging. And it's true. But also it shows that there was a social context of our worship together, our time spent on the Sabbath together, that was noticed if you weren't there. Because they could just as easily be asking you, was something wrong? Was there illness in your family? Was there something that happened and you couldn't make it? There could have been concern behind that too. 20 years ago, you would have found the average attendance in church was probably once every 3 weeks, or once every 2. And then from about 2005 on, average church attendance across the nation was once every 4 Sundays. Now, in 2018, 2019, it's once every 6 weeks. And the persons who come into worship once every 6 weeks think of themselves as regular attenders. What that means is, when Eileen stands up here and gives announcements, when you hear them today, if you're not back here for 6 more weeks, whatever it was going on, you're not going to hear any more about it. Or if you weren't here today, you won't even know about it, which is driving churches toward electronic communications, from the Trinity app, to Facebook, to Instagram, to Snapchat. This is the way we're having to reach our congregations now, because attendance average is once every 6 weeks. And attendance in churches has a much bigger effect than you can ever imagine. Because downstream of churches and the attendance in churches are our seminaries, the places where persons go to be trained to be your pastors, teachers, and Christian educators. And in the next 10 years, 80% of the seminaries in the United States of America will close their doors forever. There are 189 seminaries only in our country now. And the next 10 years, there'll be 50-some. When I went to seminary, it was at the conclusion of the Vietnam War in Europe. In the mid-1970s, when I walked on campus, Union Theological Seminary, there were 1,700 students, more than that, on campus. Today, there are fewer than 250. Seminaries are downstream of the congregation. There are so many competing interests, for your desires. That Jesus Christ and Jesus' desires for this world are taking second place and third place at best. To put on the mind of Christ means, in a sense, that you and I begin to see the world as God does. And in order to change that world into what God wants this world to be like, requires that you and I live in a constant state of preparation to model what that looks like in these days of chaos and confusion and tribalism and political party hatred and just vile things that come out of the mouths of some of our so-called leaders that we wouldn't allow our teenagers to say. When did that become acceptable to you and me? What's happened to us is the mind of Christ so foreign and alien to us now that it is a severe discomfort. It's crippling to live in this world as a follower of Jesus Christ, because it denies you certain freedoms that you see others not only taking advantage of but abusing. And the human condition is belittled, demeaned, distorted, corrupted. That's not how God sees the world. That's not how Jesus sees you and me. Paul once said, when believers have the mind of Christ, eventually you begin to understand God's plan for the world. And you understand that God wants to bring about a purpose. To end war. To end disease and sickness. To end hatred, bitterness, enmity. It doesn't make us infallible, putting on the mind of Christ. It doesn't mean that we get to play God. It just simply means that we know what God is supposed to look like. And we know what being an image of God is supposed to require of the likes of you and me. And it has to have a visible awareness to the world, so that the world will know that you are Christian by how we love one another. Lent is coming to a close this week. I'm not keen on that because I really like the color purple. You notice I have purple shirts, other things purple, and I wear them. And Lent is framed by Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. On Ash Wednesday, when you and I are marked with a cross on the forehead, it's just a reminder of our common humanity. Asian, African, South American, Russian, Jew, Muslim, Hindu, Christian. We are all daughters and sons of God, and we share a common humanity, which means that if we ever get this mind of Christ to where we see one another with eyes that revere life, then I will want for you all the good things that I have for myself. That'll take care of our healthcare needs. And I want for you, and the least among us, what I have for myself. And also, there's Good Friday. There we witness the death of another human being. And we're told that this death, and through that death, we don't have to worry about our sins anymore. We won't repeat them. But we don't have to drag them about through life and let them cripple us anymore either, because in that cross, when we rise from the knee that's bowed to that, we can go about as new creations, new creatures, because we have the mind of Christ. Lent's intended to end at the cross because it began through the human condition that we all share. And it takes on a high level of importance because it reminds us that this gift of life that's yours and mine for a brief period of time is the pilgrimage that you are on. Each one of us is on a unique pilgrimage. Had its beginning, will have its middle and exciting times, and will have its end. But this pilgrimage is where we learn how to be disciples of Jesus Christ. And I can't be a faithful disciple of Jesus Christ without your help. Because as hard as I try, I can't see the world that clearly as Jesus saw it and sees it without your clarifying my vision from time to time. Giving me a new way to talk and think and move about and have my being. That's what gives Jesus Christ another expression of the very resurrection itself. That the new life that was prefigured in him is prefigured in each and every one of us. And we need one another's vision in order to be a more faithful disciple of Jesus Christ. Because this is our one and only pilgrimage in this life. So this week, wear that image with humility and serve Jesus Christ with the highest integrity you have. And people will know that you're a Christian because of what comes out of your mouth, not what goes in it. And what's offered with hands that are open and not fists that are clenched. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.